Are you being real with your romantic relationship? The reason I ask is many people are in relationships because of fear. And what I want to know is, are you in your relationship because of fear or because of love? Fear that I'm getting too old. This is the last opportunity I have. This is the best I can get. Are you telling yourself a story that you are content and satisfied? I would say being in a relationship for love is the only reason, and it's all ultimately for growth. And if you're no longer growing, then you need to reconsider what you're doing with yourself.
There are over 7 billion people, but only one of you. Are you being real with yourself and those you care about? That's what the One and Only podcast is all about. Being true to who you are, even when it's not easy. I'm Mark Shapiro, and each week we dive below the surface to bring you honest storytelling, valuable tips, and inspiration to enrich your relationships, careers, and overall lives. It's time to get real.
Welcome to episode 127 of the Are You Being Real podcast, the one and only of them. And this is Doug Aiken. I am running the ship here in the beginning for Mark as he's working on his TEDx talk. And so we got an exciting guest on the show, Brandon Beachum, who is the owner of the Positive Head podcast. And I found him to be a really interesting guy to listen to. He's got some great spiritual nuggets, some really relatable stuff that he talks about, and kind of are great reminders, I think, for everybody. You know, sometimes we think we've heard it all, or what am I going to learn from this? And he really lands a very relatable approach to, you know, inspiring people to believe more in themselves, to check in with themselves, and to really find their greatness and their superpowers. He said one thing I thought was kind of funny and memorable. Self-doubt is a lump of coal meant to be transmitted into a diamond. You know, he just talks about a lot of things about letting go of control and about really just the spiritual oneness of everything. But again, in a really cool and kind of refreshing, everyday dude language that was someone you went to high school with. So, you know, I was really digging it. I hope you do as well. And strap in for a great show. Also, if you want to check out more of me and enjoy my voice and want to be around it more, you can visit the areyoubeingreel.com/123 and check out the episode that we did together. Also, there's a really cool sponsor of the show, Organifi, and we've been sipping on some of the green juice, and I have to say, it is actually very good. So if you want to taste some delicious green juice and get a good vibration within your body as well as your mind, which you will certainly be getting from this upcoming episode, a nice mind bath experience into the realms of consciousness, and want to meet that with some green juice to warm your palate, go to Organifi.com and use the code WINNINGWEEKS at the checkout and get 20% off of your purchases. So, without any more rambling and babbling and whatever else we call this wonderful world of speech, I will introduce you to the following episode, 127. I think there will only be 127. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. All right. Ciao for now.
Brandon, I love doing research on you before this interview today. And I listened to many of your podcasts, but in, I believe, the first or second podcast, you called yourself a spaz. So I wanted you to describe your spazziness. What does that look like?
That's funny. I don't remember 450 episodes ago when I would have said that, but it sounds like me. So, you know, I've always had a lot of energy. My parents will reference when I was, you know, as soon as I could walk, they'd try and hold me. And I'm like, no, I gotta go, got things to do. And so learning to actually, I would say in the 2 years since those first episodes, I've grounded myself. Even before we started today, you saw me take a moment to ground myself. Yeah. And so I'm working on that. It's, we all have gifts and challenges, and sometimes those two things go hand in hand. And so that spazziness has worked well for me to accomplish some interesting things, create success for myself. Now I'm learning to become a little more refined, working on refining that, grounding it, and letting things flow a little smoother, although it's still in me. I mean, to be super calm is not calm. They say calm is your superpower, and I'm still working on that superpower.
Nice. What is the biggest collection that you've ever built? Something material.
The biggest collection that I've ever built. Probably baseball cards when I was a kid.
I was not expecting you to say that.
No, because I'm not really into it at all, but at the time I was.
You're not a collector?
Not so much.
Okay,
no,
interesting.
So
I thought maybe you'd have some kind of collection.
No.
Baseball cards.
Yeah, who'd have thunk it?
There you go. I'm curious to know about your identity as a kid. I imagined you to be incredibly curious. What were you like as a kid?
Incredibly curious. A lot of questions. Why? Exploring. Very. I feel like I've maintained some of my childlike qualities, youthful qualities throughout my life. It would be a superpower, I think.
I see you as this kid who is talking to grandparents and is totally on their level intellectually, and is that kind of on?
Yeah. No, I definitely, I think of my own son. A little different perspective, and there's a lot of similarities in our mannerisms and so forth. And he, at 3-4 years old, people would be floored watching him talk. He'd be like, "Hi, how are you? It's so nice to meet you today." People were like, "How old is this kid?"
Yeah.
So I don't know if I was quite as cool as him. He's even more that way than I. But yeah, I definitely was not scared to mix it up with any and everyone, and I've always loved connecting with people of all ages and walks of life.
You started building the Positive Head podcast a little over 2 years ago. Have released over 400 episodes. If you had to drill it down to one or two greatest personal lessons, what would you say those would be?
Lessons for me or lessons that I teach? Ooh. And, speaking of my collection that I built, that's probably the biggest collection that I've built, right?
There you go.
Of these podcast episodes, 450-ish. So the biggest lessons for me is that the more I know, the more I realize I don't know. So I started the podcast to teach what I did know. And even today's episode, I learned a great technique that I had never heard before. And I tried it and I was like, wow, this is awesome. And, I ended up sharing and talking about today's episode that I recorded prior to coming here.
What was the technique?
The technique was a manifestation technique. So, you hear all the time, I talk a lot on the show, for those of you who aren't familiar, about energy and consciousness and creating your reality and manifestation and those sorts of things. And this particular technique came from someone on the Positive Heads Facebook group. They tagged me and said, "Hey, Brandon, check this out." Checked it out. And, I forget the name of the guy. He was excellent, though. I would like to have him on as a guest. And he was talking about, a lot of people, their manifestation technique, you hear law of attraction kind of ideas of, okay, visualize it and feel what it feels like and all those things. Be it, right? Yeah. And well, the problem with that, and we've talked about this before on my show, is a lot of times when you start focusing on, okay, this is the thing I want, your focus instantly goes to the lack of it. Right. And if you now it draw, and it's hard not to, right?
Of course.
And so you now zero in on the lack of it, which is, in contrast to what you're actually trying to do, because you want to swim in the vibration of that which you want to see more of. So what this technique was actually doing it the opposite way, taking a past experience and injecting what you want into it. So you're just telling the story anyway about whatever happened to you 10 days ago.
Okay.
Now, let's say you're single and you want that next relationship, for example. Picture yourself at that event with that perfect partner. So you have the context of the past relationship, the past experience already. Now you kind of inject this and rewrite it in a way that makes it maybe easier to get into vibrational alignment with it and not focused about the lack in the future.
That is really interesting.
Isn't it good?
I love playing around with perspective.
I know, I do too.
It's so powerful when we make a little subtle shift in the way we see things, how that opens up a world of opportunities for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I was very, as soon as I tried the technique, I'm like, oh, I love this. I'm going to talk about this today. So
cool. I'm definitely going to try that out. Thank you for that.
Yeah. I wish I had the guy's name on the tip of my tongue. I would share it because he deserves credit.
So that was a tip from Brandon Beachum?
Yeah, I came up with it myself. I'm very wise.
What have you been pondering lately?
What have I been pondering lately? You know what I've been pondering a lot? Well, we've talked about it a little bit. Learning to, I've always been such a doer. How do I get in the flow more and not try as much and let things come to me? Mm-hmm. So that's something that I've pondered quite a bit is, I feel like I was told by someone who's, intuitive that my mantra has always been, I work hard for what I get, and there's some definite truth to that. And I have worked hard to create interesting things, but it's all, she said, you're shifting your mantra. This year for you is about shifting your mantra to allowing it to flow more easily, to working smarter, not harder, and energetically.
Amen, brother.
And with your energy, working with energy, and so I'm really working on that piece.
As am I.
Yeah.
As am I. I work all the time. I would like to work smarter, not harder.
Right.
And open up more time and space.
Right. We're learning to be benders of time and space in some way, I think. Yeah. But we're still amateurs, as we get this down.
What is something that you believe that many other people would disagree with or argue?
Well, probably a lot of people would disagree with the concept that I am God and you are God and we are all source God. A lot of people would agree with that idea, but maybe particularly in my sort of your circle, of open-minded, consciousness oriented individuals, transformational festivals, which I attend a lot of. Yeah. So, but outside of that, there would be a lot of people that would definitely disagree with me, I'm pretty sure. Starting with my own father.
Nice. What do you think more people should know about or be thinking of or being real about?
People should be more real about their potential and about their choices that they're making. A lot of times people settle. So people are willing to settle because they think, well, this is the best that I can do. And truly, if what I said a moment ago is true, you're one with the source that creates and animates all things. And as a result, you have all those sort of powers, at arm's length. So if people can start to be real with themselves and the fact that they're literally an eternal being having a human experience, I believe that will lead to more interesting experiences, more fulfilling life experiences.
Absolutely. And if we believe it and be it and put in the time and the effort and get feedback, I think anything is possible. That's something I've certainly learned about myself and my journey, doing something that I never envisioned for myself.
Right.
And
you put yourself out on a limb.
I couldn't even picture us having this conversation, on video in 2017, just a few years ago.
Right.
But it was when I started to expand what I thought I was capable of and taking one step at a time, it really has opened up those possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're a great example of someone who's done this.
Thank you.
And you put yourself, you sort of have to, you have to confront your fears. I think as Eleanor Roosevelt said, do something every day that makes you uncomfortable. So step out, put yourself out there, and you will be met. There's a great quote. I say it all the time on my podcast. It's long, so I don't have it memorized. I need to because I want to say it like almost every time I talk. It's Terrence McKenna talking about facing your fears. This is the alchemical gold, the dance in the shamanic waterfall, facing and going for it and jumping off the ledge when you really don't know, but moving into your heart. And he says, ultimately you find it's a feather bed when you land.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
That's where it's at.
Yeah, leap of faiths are scary.
And we're all set up with them, I feel like. They're presented to everyone, but not everyone takes the leap. And staying on the side of the pool is really not
beautifully said. Shamanic waterfall?
Yeah, I know. Once again, I can't take
I have no idea what that means, but it sounds amazing.
Cool.
It sounds cool. What do you personally struggle with most?
What do I struggle with most? Wow, that's a great question. I struggle with being in the moment the most. you know, one of my favorite books is by Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. And, you know, it's for me, it's very, I can be particularly nostalgic or thinking a lot about what's to come and what I'm going to do and what I'm going to manifest, and at the expense of now, which is really foolish, because really all we ever have is now. There will never be, the future never comes like we imagine it. The past doesn't exist even like we imagine it either. And we even talked about a technique how you can get even more delusional with that in a good way, right? So you're always in the now. You will always be in the now, and the now is perfect, and it is exactly what you need. And you know, and yet I find myself with that spazziness we talked about, like, okay, what do I do next? Where do I go? You know, and you can miss out on you miss out on everything. Whereas the moments where I have tuned into the now and said, wow, this moment is as perfect as any moment ever has been or will be. And if you can bring that concept to each moment is divine, perfectly divine in its own way, and then you start approaching it from that perspective, then, you know, it starts to sort of light up in a new way. You start to see things you didn't see before. The colors are more vibrant, you know, and I believe that's the path. Yeah. Now, knowing it is one thing, applying it is another. So I'm working on that one.
There's so much to see in every single frame.
Yeah, right.
Little moments in life. This question is from our friends at My Intent. If you had to drill down your intention in general into one word, maybe for 2017 or this summer, what would it be?
My intention for myself, or my intention for sort of my life work?
For yourself.
For myself is to be more present and to manifest more easily. I just feel like I need to say my intention for the world is to help spread consciousness and to remind people of how magical they are and how much power they have that is sort of dormant that they're not tapping into.
And because this show is all about being real, what is something that is real and perhaps challenging for you right now?
Something that is real and challenging for me. Okay, so one of the things that is real and challenging for me, I have, of course, as we've talked about, a podcast as well. I have, it's a labor of love. I absolutely love it. And I have an intention to sort of take it to another level with, you know, video production and sort of a concept around that. And however, the bills are real, although it is growing a lot and all those things, and there's so much potential there. I have another company. I have a travel company that has a whole lot of potential as well. And I have a company that I built prior in the same space that grew to be one of the 500 and something fastest growing companies in the country in Inc. magazine in 2015. Then we sort of got hit by an asteroid and it imploded. And then I started something new in the same space that is now starting to really gain momentum. And it has,
congratulations.
It's great. It has even more potential than the prior project, but I know how much it takes to build something like that. And it's been like R&D kind of year plus. And now it's like, okay, your model's working. Now the real work begins. Meanwhile, my heart is over here and raising consciousness and, you know, doing this more creative work, although that's creative from an entrepreneurial standpoint. So where do I, you know, there's been a lot of internal, like, am I doing the right thing, this thing for money versus how many people, you know, when I get a email, and I'm sure you've had it, or a message or a review on iTunes, like, oh my gosh, I was suicidal a few months ago and now my life has turned around because I tuned into this broadcast. Thank you for, you know, you're my best friend and never knew it, and stuff like, it's like the most rewarding thing ever. Money doesn't even come close.
Right.
Yet, what can I do with money, right? And especially so much potential financial abundance from this project. So finding that balance of how do I juggle both? You know, the Confucius, I think, said the man who chases two rabbits catches none. And I'm like, oh gosh, thanks, Confucius. I'm like chasing like four of these suckers.
You really had to share that.
Yeah, I know, huh?
I completely relate to that.
I think a lot of people are going through their own version of this.
Yeah, I mean, between this podcast and my Winning Weeks program and wanting to get out and do more speaking. I'm doing a TEDx talk next month.
Oh,
that's really excited
I saw you post that. Congratulations.
Thank you
that's
much.
So cool.
Thank you. I come up with ideas faster than I can implement them. And what I've kind of learned to do is to ride my passion and trust that as long as I'm applying my energy and my effort to something that's within my ultimate vision, then I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be fulfilled one way or the other. So I don't watch TV anymore. I don't waste any time. I'm always applying my time and energy and effort to my vision.
Right.
I might be applying my time, energy, and effort to something that's number 12 on my priority list. Right. But it's still forwarding the vision in some sort of way. And I find if I am tapping into my passion, trusting my intuition, that naturally things are going to work out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things that to me, I feel like sort of the intuitively, I feel like the answer is still out as to why, because, and I can sort of draw conclusions and envision, if this goes one way and okay, so I've kind of worked out something with my brother, who's my business partner, that I'm going to give it a year, with that. And sort of, I'm helping a lot with the architecting of the model itself. Now it's starting to grow some. There's still some architecture, architecting. Is that a word? Yeah, architecting.
Yeah.
It's a word now. There's still some of that needs to go on. So it needs me for a while. And ultimately, but I've sort of that was sort of my compromise is, okay, let's put a cap on how much longer I will give energy to this project and then put myself out of a job, so to speak.
Nice.
I'm a founder, but not working day to day.
It's a nice signpost.
Yeah. And I feel like when we do that sort of thing, you sort of create, setting aims or goals. I'm a big fan of, but you've got to do them with also no expectation, like release them if they don't.
Yes.
It's just find the art of manifestation is like, let me envision it. Let me set, and even if I set a time frame or something like that, it gives the universe something to play with me on and work with me on achieving. But then don't be too attached to it, because once you bring in that attachment, that expectation, that's when you set yourself up for, disappointment, the wrong sort of energetic experience, if you will.
Totally agree. And the last question of this authenticity gauntlet here, this show is called The One and Only. The premise, there's 7 billion people and only one of each of us. And I know you're a big advocate of the oneness, the all one consciousness. But for this question, what makes you the one and only? What makes you one of a kind?
Oh, man. What makes me one of a kind? I would say my superpower is really what you just touched on. I have such a clear vision of who and what we are and what we're doing here. And I feel so strongly about it. For whether right or wrong, that's a whole nother thing. But I believe I have it figured out, who we are, what we're doing here, how this game works to some degree. I'm still getting my chops. I'm still learning how to manifest. It's one thing to know it and it's another to apply it.
Yep.
But I feel like that's really my superpower is the vision of what's really going on. And then I feel like I have a talent for bridging other people to see that vision in a way that touches them and transforms them, whether it's instant transformation and their whole world's turned upside down because they were just ready for their interaction with me, whether through the podcast in person, or whether it's a seed that's planted and, that maybe blooms 10 years down the road. I feel like that's sort of my unique gift. And well, I'm not the only one with that gift, but I feel like I do it in my way. That's, only me.
Welcome to the show, the one and only Brandon Beachum.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
It's a pleasure to have you, brother.
It's an honor to be here.
Yeah,
we've been talking about this a while.
I know we have, and it was supposed to happen exactly today. I had the great fortune of being on your show, I believe, in December. So probably lots of episodes.
Seems like a lifetime ago now.
It does seem like a lifetime ago. So Brandon is the host of the Positive Head podcast, which is one of the top spirituality podcasts on iTunes based on results. You're consistently top 3, top 5 in the spirituality category, and it's less than 2 years old or around 2 years old. You built it from scratch, releasing 5 episodes a week. Now I release 1 episode a week, so to release 5 is unbelievable. Your consistency is on another level, and I have so much respect for who you are and what you're creating, as well as your voice. You explore consciousness and all sorts of controversial topics, and you talk about psychics and mysticism, and you're really a master storyteller. Just when I was preparing for this episode today, I listened to a number of your podcasts and was fully ingrained Now, I'm someone that likes to have music on or likes to have a podcast on in the background when I'm doing other work. And oftentimes I miss stuff that I'm listening to because I'm focused on my work. And I was actually really able to keep my attention on both. And like, it really is a testament to you and your storytelling. You really bring your audience like right in there. And you talk about some of these maybe controversial topics, these mystical topics. And at the same time, you believe in them because you're open. And at the same time, you challenge and question them as you're talking about them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that that's part of the reason why it makes it so relatable. It almost doesn't matter whether or not your audience or the particular person who's listening agrees with you or not. They're getting your perspective and you really take them in there, and your passion and the detail really keeps us drawn in. Thank you for being who you are.
Oh, thank you so much for all that. That was beautiful and well received. Yeah, the thing with some of the topics that I delve into, I always say, we teach best what we most need to learn. So I'm doing it first and foremost for myself.
Yeah.
And I've always been sort of that, had that boy-like quality of like, adventure, get my hand in the cookie jar. What's really going on behind the scenes, Yeah. And so I love to explore a lot of those ideas. They're so fun for me. And I've had enough experiences, that have sort of rocked my world to kind of show me behind the curtain and show me that there is more going on than maybe you would hear on Fox News tonight. And
also.
But at the same time, I always say, if I haven't had this experience, I'm not saying it is or it isn't true. Like, one of my favorite teachers, for example, Esther Hicks, she claims to channel a non-physical entity that refers to itself as Abraham, right? Or it's a collective consciousness. Yeah. So it's supposedly a collective entity that just calls themselves Abraham. Now, for me, at the end of the day, I don't think it's any more strange that some consciousness would animate her form than the person Esther Hicks, right? I mean, it's weird enough that we're here at all, right? So I don't know that that's that much stranger. So essentially, but for me, it's what's the content even? It's like, she claims to be doing this. All I know is she's brilliant. Her message resonates when I apply the teachings. They're like rock solid and work so well for me. So it's more about, I can't say for sure whether it is or isn't true, because it hadn't happened to me in such a way I would stand here and say, yes, I'm channeling whoever right now. And but it almost like, it's like sort of a secondary issue. What's the message,
Yeah. It's funny in that a few years ago, I would be like, that's crazy. And not only is that crazy, but anyone who would listen and believe it is even crazier. Right. I love Abraham Hicks.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic. The first time that I heard it, I instantly wrote it off and maybe gave it like 4 seconds. Then Jess Lively. Do you know Jess? She's got a great podcast, that Lively show. She was on this show last summer, and she showed me some of Abraham's videos, and ever since I've loved it. I don't listen to it that consistently, but on a day where I wake up and I'm struggling a little bit, I'll turn on some Abraham Hicks, and her voice, his voice is so soothing and aligning. So
absolutely.
If anyone who's listening hasn't checked out Abraham Hicks, highly recommend it.
Yeah, listen with an open mind. I always say, whatever you do, don't believe me.
Right.
That it's, if I were to claim it's real, anyone, just see what it does for you. Open-minded. What do they say?
It's
having an open mind.
Right?
Minds only work. Was it parachutes? And what is the quote? Minds are like parachutes. They only function if they're open. So, keep it open.
Since we were talking a little bit about podcasts, I figured let's continue to talk a little bit more about podcasts, because you got an amazing one. And it's the most common email I get from people is telling me, hey, I want to launch a podcast. Can I get a couple of minutes of your time to talk about podcasts or whatnot? So let's talk about podcasts first. And I've got a number. You talk about so many different subjects on your show. I've got a whole long list. I'm going to see how many questions I can ask you here in today's episode.
Excellent.
But in terms of podcasts, my question for you is, what would you say to someone who is interested in launching a podcast?
Great question. For me, when I first decided to launch a podcast, there's a guy who does a podcast called Entrepreneurs on Fire, John Lee Dumas.
John Lee Dumas.
And he puts a lot of information out there about the sort of the basics
yes.
Of podcasting. So for me, I got some great first tips, and a lot of it's just free and awesome that he does that. And then he has like where you can sign up and join like a podcaster,
and get the mug.
Yeah, and get the and get the free mug. So
I thought that was so tacky personally.
Yeah, The sort of delivery is not my style.
It doesn't come across as authentic.
It doesn't come across as that authentic to me. It's a lot of like, this is a vehicle to sell. And I wanted to be very careful with that with my podcast.
Yes.
Being someone who actually comes from a background of sales, my organization is a sales organization, and having done a lot of that and very successfully, for this is like sacred to me. So I've been very slow. I just got my first sponsor with Gaia.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And my first one as well, Organifi.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So that both very like high vibe. Yeah. Something that you believe in, right? And I'm not saying he doesn't believe in what but it just has that sort of like, hey, I've got something for you feel, and I don't know. I just want to be, I don't know. This is like, and it's a different type of podcast too. So, anyway, I don't want to.
So in terms of podcasting, so that's the first step.
What would I recommend? Yeah, we kind of got on a tangent. So checking someone out like him, and I'm very grateful that he had some good tips, a few tips that for me, I had a background. I was in a band for many years, and at the time, my ex-guitarist from that band was staying with me. He's actually my original co-host for a while, Daly, and he's in a lot of my early episodes, first 150 or so, maybe more. I don't know. He left maybe a year ago or close to it. And he's very tech savvy and, does a lot of like recording and, so it was helpful having him around. He still does the editing of my show. So, I would get the basic gear, find out the basic gear. And most importantly is don't get too caught up on like, perfection is the enemy of good enough.
Yes.
So just turn it on, start doing your thing. Although one good tip that I remember John Lee Dumas giving was do at least 5 episodes before you release, because then when someone subscribes to you on iTunes, they download all 5, which then can help sort of, pump you up into the what's hot and new kind of thing, which then, creates that snowball effect.
There's a whole science to it.
Yeah, right. And I'm certainly, I'm one of these guys who's maybe to a fault an island at times. Like I don't listen to a lot of other podcasts. I don't look, it's like, so I did do some research prior to starting, but for the most part, some people get really caught up on getting it perfect.
Yeah.
I would just say do it without expectation. Do it because you love it, and then if it helps one other person, and it will so it's already a success.
So you would say yes. If you're thinking about launching a podcast, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're feeling called to do anything, follow that, that inkling. Well, unless it's like go murder the guy next door or rob a bank. Maybe don't follow that. Maybe seek some help somewhere.
I would say the same thing. There are a lot of little tips and knacks out there that are great resources free on the internet. Mm-hmm. And with that said, I totally agree with you as well that it's about consistency. It's about getting a message out there more so than a particular means to an end as to getting sponsors.
Yeah, if it's like, I'm going to make my money off of this. Not that you can't have that idea, but I don't know. It's kind of like with my old band. It was so much fun until we had to make it. Right. And then it was like, we're not signed to this label at the time or whatever. And it's like, do it because you love it.
Exactly. And it's hard, especially at the start. I think it gets easier. I spend less time prepping for interviews. Feel still like I'm creating just as good or better content. Part of it is I trust myself more in the interviews. And at the same time, that a lot of people give up after 10, 15, 20 episodes when their audience doesn't take off or they don't get the massive success that they want. And so I always remind people when they ask me about launching a podcast, the first thing I say is, does it need to be a podcast? Is that the best vehicle for you to get your message out there? Would doing a Facebook Live be better? Would it be doing some sort of blog? And the reason why I say that is because with a podcast, you need to, if you're promoting it on Facebook, let's say you've got a decent community on Facebook and that's who you're really targeting or marketing your content to, you first need to introduce to them this concept and then kind of hold their hand and bring them over to iTunes. It's not right there on Facebook. And Facebook, the algorithm doesn't really reward you for external links.
Right.
So that's the one thing that I'd say with a podcast that I found to be challenging is if someone doesn't know me, if they don't know you, if they don't know my guest, why would some random person want to listen to the content? Right. So it's definitely challenging. And like I said, I think with consistency over time, credibility can be built. People become more familiar with your brand, and there's more of a likelihood over time, one person at a time, that it can snowball and ultimately create all sorts of new opportunities. But when I first launched the podcast, I was hoping it would bring in coaching clients.
Right.
And it didn't.
Right.
It really didn't at all.
Right.
Because iTunes doesn't really give a lot of statistics as to who's listening, which is a challenge. For me, the greatest thing about having a podcast is connecting with the guests on the show and building relationships with people like yourself. And I've had like New York Times bestselling authors come and sit on this couch.
Super incredible experience.
Super duper cool. That's not what I thought would be the outcome when I first launched the podcast. And over time, naturally, more opportunities have come as a result of it. And I have the Winning Weeks program that people have found through the podcast. People I've had on the podcast have come on Winning Weeks. So it's been really cool. So it's created other opportunities more so than it being like a huge moneymaker on its own, which it hasn't been.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier. Like, set your goal, set your aim, but let go of all that expectation. And then ask yourself, what is... if you want to see sort of what the outcome of something is going to be, look at the underlying intention. And if the underlying intention is really pure, you're going to have success on some level. Like if it's not pure, then, you're always going to get a reflection of what you put out. Yeah. And so, what is your intention? If your intention is like, hey, I really want to, for me, I felt so called to share sort of a lot of this spiritual concepts and consciousness related concepts with people, and my friends and family's ears were bleeding after years of it. So I that vehicle was like, I needed that vehicle. And I really, maybe even one of the first times in my life, I went into it without like crazy expectation or need. I'm doing this. I even say it all the time on the show. I'm doing this first and foremost for myself. Yeah. If you guys benefit, excellent, but there are ultimately no selfless acts. Right. And if you're,
love that concept.
Yeah, it really is. And
everything's selfish.
Yeah. And the good kind of selfish, when you're doing it, and this gets back to some of my philosophy and theory, it's all, everywhere you go, you're there waiting for yourself. It's all extensions of the one self, the same source consciousness that animates all things, animates me and you. The separation between us is an illusion. So whatever I'm doing for you, I'm doing to an extension of self. And first and foremost, ground zero is doing it because you feel called to, and then letting the cards fall where they may.
Love it. Absolutely love it. You've shared your story in depth, so many stories, master storyteller on your podcast. So I'm not going to ask you to tell your life story because it's available on your show, and I think everyone should tune into your show. I did want to ask you, though, if there were a few moments, let's say there were 3 moments in your life that stand out as the main 3 pivotal moments, what would you say those would be?
For someone whose memory is somewhat challenged at times. Let me see, the 3 most pivotal moments. Moving to California was a pivotal moment for me. I grew up in Virginia. I went to college in Tennessee and then formed a band there, and we decided to move to California. That was a pivotal. I wouldn't be sitting here right now without that. Having having a son was obviously a pivotal moment. And I would say starting this podcast, starting Positive Head Podcast was a pivotal moment, because although it started like most things very quietly, it's like as I do it, I feel like, this is truly the work that I'm here to do. We're all here to do lots of things. Be a brother, brother, sister, father, whatever you do for work. You wear many hats, but it feels to me like the work, sort of my highest calling is, sort of being this bridge that I talked about earlier. So those would be my 3 pivotal moments, I believe.
Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Yeah.
Since this show is all about being authentic and being real, When in your life was it most challenging for you to be authentic, and why?
That's interesting. You know, one of the things that I've had to overcome, and it's still a work in progress, but you know, there's so many layers to people. There's so many masks, and someone who has had a strong background in sales, right? Selling something, trying to sell something really hard. Like, who are you trying to convince, right?
It doesn't even work.
It doesn't even work. Who are you trying to? So that's one of the things that it's really based off who I am.
Yeah.
Sort of there's a pro and a con to it, right?
Yeah.
And the con would be like, oh, if you're just trying to like, one of the things is being authentic. It means not stretching the truth or exaggerating or any of those things, and being my natural disposition and excitement. And, you know, it sort of was like a perfect powder keg of, oh, you can be very tempted to, you know, BS. And it just doesn't suit me in any way, shape, or form at this point in my journey. But in the past, it's one that I've had to work on, like, be more authentic, less. And then you see of course, you always see reflections around you. I had a business partner who's like, you had to take everything he said, you know, after it's exhausting. Like, okay, well, he said it's 1,000 of this, so let me cut that in half. Okay, 500. All right. You know, it's like, I don't want to be that guy, you know. I've had to deal with, and then you get to see it in other places, and it's like, oh wow, yeah, okay, that's what I don't want to do, and yeah, I can see where I've done that before. Okay, stop, you know. So it's not as easy as stop, but yeah, I feel like I'm at a point where I'm a very authentic person at this point in my journey.
I want to look at the flip side of that, and something that you believe, as that we're all part of one consciousness and part of one divine energy. So, what's the relationship between that and then being individually authentic? Those, in a way, are a paradox.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a paradox. It's a divine dichotomy. You and I are two separate beings. That's obvious. The most obvious thing. That's a truth. It's a relative truth. From another truth, another perspective, you and I are one. That I also believe is a truth. So you have layers of truth. You have, you know, relative truths. Maybe on some layers it's multiply yes, no, yes, you know. And that's how I believe reality is structured. And so essentially, and this goes into sort of the work that I'm doing and feeling called to do, I feel like I'm awake and aware of what's going on, who we are. It's all one. Yet I am source in this physical form that's awake to some degree, right? Still more to go. But then there are those external parts of me that are maybe being deceptive, and that reflects some part of me. So I feel like the only thing to do once you start to kind of wake up to some of these concepts is, oh my gosh, how can I serve the other me's? Because if they're hurting, they're a reflection of me that's hurting. And so, you know, I believe whatever your life path is and where you're going to be most fulfilled always involves service to others in some way. And the reason is because you get what you give, because you're always doing it to self. So how you kind of deal with those is, okay, I'm one pinpoint of consciousness. It's like in your cells. Your cells are pinpoints of consciousness, trillions of them, right? But then they make up me. Well, it's kind of like this nested Russian doll concept. That's what's going on here, you know, all the way up. You know, I would say we're cells in the body of this planet, which has its own spirit, which we're a part of, you know, but also separate from both. And it's a part of a bigger system and a bigger system and a bigger system. And so it's just infinite in both directions. Source is infinite, you know, and same when you start zooming in on a microscope. So it's kind of mind blowing, but so it's other me's. It's like, oh, I'm, you know, I'm seeing a reflection. It's all, everywhere you go, you're there waiting for yourself. So whoever you're bumping up against in 3D reality is telling you something about yourself that you need to pay attention to. And that's one big change.
And that's why you see it.
Yeah, that's one big change in my world. Whereas I used to be like, oh, I'm super smart. I can out-argue anyone. I can out-talk anyone. I'm right. You're wrong. Here's why you did me wrong. And here's why, you know, I should win this argument. And then you realize, like, now as I grow and mature, I'm like, oh, okay, what are you telling me about me? Because you're really just a prop in my movie to some degree, and vice versa. Yeah. So I am a part of your consciousness that is this, you know, that is resonating with all these ideas. And so what am I telling you about you? Now, what are you telling me about me? And you're here because we have something out of 7 billion people on the planet, we're sitting across from each other because we're such a vibrational match that it's like in perfect timing to serve one another.
I'll tell you what you're telling me, that I should tell more stories and I should share more detail about stories versus give a sweeping generalization.
Right. Yeah, I definitely, that's beautiful. I love that I have inspired you in that way, because if it's funny that you say that, because sometimes I'll have these sorts of conversations and it's like, I'll look at myself from the other perspective. It's like, okay, you ramble, you go on and on and on. Like even when before we turned on the camera, we were talking and you're like, okay, I got to turn this on. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just like going on a tangent. It's always about finding that balance too, right? So
hey, we all learn from each other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's exactly right.
What would you say is the deepest reason as to why you started and continued to do your podcast? Was there something that happened as a kid, you think, that started pointing you in this direction?
Okay, so I've had this. Okay, so one of the things that I think we deal with as one becomes more aware of their empowered connectedness to all things. I am literally God in a physical, for lack of a better word. I'm everything and nothing, It's like, and I don't say that in an egotistical way. I believe you are it too, right? As we're talking, we all are. But as you first start coming into that,
thank you for seeing that.
Yeah, well, let me show you, shoot lightning out of my ass. But as I first started coming into that realization, I believe you're having your own private movie and you're the lead director and actor. And once again, I'm a prop in it to some degree, right? So it's all you and it's all mirrors for you everywhere you go. And when you first start waking up to some of these ideas, it's like, it's me, I'm the one, right? And I'm the one here and I also believe there's separate timelines. There's versions of you that do different things. I believe time is an illusion, and there's the you that didn't have the guts to start the one and only and stuck with your old job. And I believe source plays out every possibility. And I believe there's the greatest and grandest version is super rewarding, and you can make this huge impact in that timeline where you're sort of like the one who helps to save the world, right? I believe that hero's journey, that story, it's in every movie that's popular because it resonates with this physical journey. So when I started to wake up to, oh my gosh, I'm the one and I've got these gifts and I can help wake up the planet. And so I started having those sort of realizations. And now I've kind of brought it down to a point where it's like, oh, I believe as I sit here, I will affect millions of lives. I will help wake up a lot of people. But that's one timeline. There's plenty of timelines where Brandon's, drunk under a bridge. No, I don't know if that's one of them, but you know what I mean? So if I say our life plays out at the corner of free will and destiny. Mm-hmm. So if you saw the movie Interstellar, right? 1 minute on this planet, 20 years or whatever it was on the planet. That's based off real science. So we know, time is an illusion. We've kind of shown that. Einstein has shown that. So it's all already happened. Your fifth birthday party is happening on another channel right now. You're not tuned to that frequency, to that channel, so to speak. Well, in a sense, it's all destined, but free will comes in where you get to choose which version of you are going to experience. So, to give you an example, you talked about psychics or intuitives. I believe they're just tapping into this sort of Akashic records of, eternity, like Google for the universe, right? And the first one I ever went to, the woman said, "Oh, I see you in a cold place like Chicago in business." Well, I was in Atlanta, Georgia. She was at some mall.
I went to Emory.
Oh, cool. Okay. So yeah, I went to Lipscomb in Nashville, and my girlfriend went to the Art Institute of Atlanta at the time. Cool. So I was down there visiting her and some random woman on the side of the road, and we stopped sporadically. She goes, "I see you in a cold place like Chicago in business." Well, my jaw hit the floor because I was planning to move to Chicago and work in business for my uncle at that time. She goes, "But there's this whole other path for you in California and music and blah, blah, blah." Well, a year later, with the help of some psilocybin mushrooms, I, started waking up to a lot of these concepts and, oh man, I can do anything. It's all mine. I want to make music. So I ended up then meeting someone from California, brought me out here to visit, and the rest is history. So what was she seeing in that moment when I sat in front of her? The possible Brandons based off of where my vibration was resonating at that moment. So that's sort of my theory on how it works. So I don't even remember what the original question was, but, once you start to understand, like, okay, there's many versions of me potentially. You want to experience the greatest and grandest version. Well, the good news is you've already done it. So now your job becomes to get into vibrational alignment, be it to see it, so to speak, be it vibrationally, and that calls it into your movie.
Yeah. In the spirit of choosing which version of ourselves that we want to be, I know something that you've shared that you struggle with is something that I struggle with, and that's self-doubt. And I get in my own way because I doubt myself. And it's really interesting. I was having this conversation with my good friend and a mentor of mine, Ganesh, and he's probably listening. Hey, Ganesh. He said, well, isn't self-doubt tied to authenticity and tied to your practice? I'm like, yeah, it totally is. So my question for you, since I know that's something that you've shared that you struggle with, is what's your relationship with self-doubt, and how do you navigate through it?
I love it. Well, first off, your friend Ganesh, what a perfect friend to talk to about this, because Ganesh is the remover of obstacles, right? And what is self-doubt but an obstacle? So my relationship with doubt is now understanding it's actually, it's a lump of coal that's meant to be transmuted into a diamond. So all your challenges, your doubt, and all these challenges that you've had at your point in the story, they're perfectly serving you. It's all happening. Life is happening for you, not to you. So it's one of those things that's there on your journey so that you can see it for what it is. And as you expand your perspective and understand, like, oh, once again, I'm tapped in. I'm part of this source consciousness which created all things. That's how wonderful I am. So now what to doubt? If it can be done, I can do it. Who else, right? I mean, it's all at my disposal in some way, shape, or form. And so just getting into alignment with that, and then in looking at doubt as a tool, because the greater one toils for their freedom, the greater the sense of freedom is achieved. So, if I have doubts, and they beat me and they knock me down time after time, but then, I keep on, I dig deeper and I expand my perspective more and find that belief in myself. And then I overcome that doubt and everything opens up. How rewarding is the experience because of the doubt? It gave you the contrast you needed to really appreciate it.
Yep. And when I agree with that, and when I find myself in doubt, I'll be in doubt and I'll be in my head and I'll be beating myself up about it. And then perhaps a few days later, I'm on the other side of the pendulum.
Yeah.
And I'm confident and I've got momentum. And when I remind myself, doubt, like any other feeling or emotion, can be temporary or is temporary. When I remind myself that, I don't get as lost in that conversation. And it makes it easier for me then to step into a confident place and to build that momentum.
You made a great point about, being in my head. And that's a big indicator of the problem. If you can, I had someone teach me, good friend Craig, teach me, when you're getting in your head and fears and all those things, practice moving your energy down to your heart. So, just a simple visualization technique of, because our center of gravity, when you look at me, you think of me here, in the face, but really our heart now we see has this great intelligence, and it sends twice as many signals to the brain as the brain does to the heart, and it has actual brain cells in it. And it's this, this ancient idea that the heart is the center is now coming back. This is where you're meant to live from. And when you take those things and you bring them and you just take a simple, imagine your center of gravity moving down into your heart space, it can take those fears and things and transmute them in a way that, it's just like a much more solid foundation and based in love, and love sort of dissolves all fear.
Yeah, it really does. And it's an easier thing said than done.
For sure.
But to even have that awareness to realize, I have that available to me when I am in my head to do an exercise to get into my heart is a really powerful thing. So it starts with that simple awareness and realization that that's available to us.
Yep.
Speaking of love, that is part of the reason why self-doubt is something that it is a word that I'm paying particular attention to these days. And part of it is because of this conversation I had with my buddy Ganesh. Another is that word came up a couple of weeks ago with my good friend Ryan Magnuson, who was telling me, he's like, no more self-doubt. He's like, anything, the whole world is available to you. The next level has less self-doubt. And I look at my growth and transformation, and the level of self-doubt is way less than it was a few years ago, because I never thought I could do this. My confidence has grown with the show. And there's still so much room for improvement and growth, whether it's whether it's targeting specific people that would seem like a reach for me to be in my Winning Weeks community, which is for high achievers, reaching out to the most powerful people in my network, or going and being more aggressive in terms of targeting specific people to have on the podcast. Those are both room for me. But my love life is really where I think it really is the pinnacle, is the self-doubt as to whether or not I feel worthy of the love that I seek. And sometimes I feel totally in relationship with my worth and what I deserve and being that person, and other times I doubt it. I wanted to share that because I love sharing vulnerably, and I wanted to tie that back to your original "Are you being real?" question about your romantic relationship. So I'm curious, are you in a romantic relationship?
No.
Why did you ask that question in regards to
because you had also mentioned the idea of talking about something that maybe would be embarrassing.
Oh, okay.
Or I don't know if that now's a good time to.
Let's save that.
Okay,
we'll save
that. Okay, so I think what you said is a really important. Embracing vulnerability is. Once again, another superpower. And I am not in a romantic relationship at this time. Although this time, about a year ago, I was in 2 romantic relationships at the same time. So I had an open relationship for the first time with my last relationship. And for the first time, even lived with 2 people at the same time, which was a very interesting experiment and growth. And, this gets into a whole nother topic, but I don't know if you're familiar with Christopher Ryan.
No.
And his, he wrote a book called Sex at Dawn, and basically talking about how, we're more like bonobos than an Eastern elephant is to a Western elephant. And how do these, and chimps, and how do they use, they don't have monogamous pair bonding like we do. Yeah. And, he basically is making the argument and showing a lot of evidence that, this sort of monogamous pair bonding thing is something that's been very recent, the last 5,000 years out of hundreds of thousands of years. So only a couple % of our existence as modern man have we even, linked up this way. So I think
love that perspective.
Yeah, check him out.
Take it as fact.
And that's what his whole. He has a TED talk. I highly recommend it. It's only like 13 minutes. It's called "Are We Sexual Omnivores?" And it's at least this particular clip. I don't know if the original was longer, but it sums it up perfectly. And his whole point is we need to stop judging people who are going out of these normal, we've looked at monogamy. That's the way it is. That's the way it's supposed to be. Right. Anything else is you're pervert or weird or, any of these things. Meanwhile, he's saying, well, actually, this is, I'm not saying we're not bashing monogamy. If that's for you, that's for you. But to judge others, it's kind of like judging, oh, you're gay, you shouldn't be, It's like, actually, the proof, the evidence is, the case he's making is we're not designed that way, which is why, of course, you have a lot of the issues you have around monogamy and divorce and all those things. It's like one of my favorite teachers, Osho's, talks about this a lot. He's like, if you love a flower, you don't pick it, or, you move into a state where you are love. It's something that you experience with someone else. It's not so much you can share it and have a special, sort of emanation of it with someone, but you are love everywhere you go at all times. And you certainly can have special connections with someone. But as soon as we start putting the rules and expectation, if you do this, I'm happy. And if you don't, I'm sad. And, I feel like if you really love someone, you set them free. It's like, I want for you what you want for you. The opposite of jealousy is compersion, being excited about your partner experiencing something that makes them excited. And it's a whole nother level, but I feel like it goes along with a lot of my ideas of oneness. And as we sort of elevate or ascend as humanity, I feel like there's going to be more and more of this. As you realize there are no others, it's just other me's. And I'm the one and only. So whatever comes into my partner's world is never going to be me, because that's impossible, right? So you find your self-confidence and all those things. So that might be more of an answer than you bargained for.
That's great.
Yeah, I am currently not in a relationship, but have definitely done my share I've had lots of years of relationship under my belt. And most recently, the most experimental kind of stab at that.
I really dig your openness. I know that opens up the door for so many new opportunities, some things that you resonate with and some things that you don't.
Yeah.
There's really only one way to find out.
That's exactly right. and not being fearful about loss. You know, a lot of people there's a lot of fear around, you know, okay, I'm getting older and, you know, this one's, you know, I look at my last girlfriend, my primary partner of 2.5 years in the last relationship. She's like 11 out of 10 and the clearest human I've ever known as far as lack of baggage and drama and just like very almost Zen, you know, Zen master kind of vibe. And yet there was something that wasn't fully clicking and on this level actually even was part of the issue. So I could have been fearful and tried to hang on and make it work. And, you know, you're not going to get one this good again or any of those things. But I can't live that way. I believe too much in myself and the ability and ultimately that the vibrational match must appear if I'm out of my own way and not living in doubt and fear. And
totally. You mentioned the word settling earlier in the interview and thought about the word settling, and then it led me to think about the word sacrificing. And I don't think that one truly needs to settle or sacrifice, especially when it comes to love. And I've always wanted to find my soulmate and get married and have kids more than anything else in the world, more than any kind of other individual professional purpose. I was married, didn't have kids, haven't had kids yet, and I'd still love that opportunity. And at the same time, while sometimes I feel like I want it today, you know, I see my brother with kids, my cousins with kids, a lot of the kids or the people I went to high school with, they have kids. It reminds me, it sounds that alarm. And at the same time, my life is fantastic.
Sure.
And I'm looking to augment that. I'm not looking to settle or keep it like at the same place. So yeah,
I would say what's interesting about almost everything is you can have what you want when you realize you don't need it. And I feel like what I'm hearing is you're in that process still. You know, that's what I heard there. It's like, my life is fantastic. And it's like, you're wise enough to see, but there's still some energetic blockage there. So when we're seeing the kids and the cousins and everyone else's, what are we focused on? The lack. They have this and I don't. And when you can look at all the gifts and focus on all the gifts that your situation provides for you. How many people, you know, at your age are sitting there with the kids poopy diapers or worse all over them, and they're in some marriage with some person that they're really not in love with, but they're there because of fear, and they're just in their own self-created hell with that scenario. So you have this wonderful scenario that is filled with blessings and connections, and, you know, that would be sort of what I instantly just tap into is like, if you can focus more on that and sort of let it go, I have no doubt that it will then appear. But it's got to be, you know, what we resist persists. What we accept, we move through, you know.
Brandon, thank you for the beautiful reflection. I'm glowing over here. And I know we can all resonate to that concept in some way, shape, or form. Yeah.
So, and just to tie it back to what I was talking about earlier, the infinite timelines, the infinite versions. So there is, I would say, definitively a version from that chair forward where the kids and all of it appears. Now, so relax about it. Let it go. You don't need to like figure it all out. You don't need to, you know, that if it can be done, Source plays it out and experiments with it. So now let it go and enjoy the heck out of what you've got now, because it will change.
I'm going to envision this Colombian adventure that I went on a couple of weeks ago with my kids there as well.
Perfect. How beautiful. I love it.
Brandon, a couple more questions before we get into the true challenge. So I've got this 8-week goal and growth accelerator program, Winning Weeks. So I love asking all of my guests a 2-part question. The first part is, what is a winning week for you? And then the second piece is, what is a game-changing life hack that you practice that supports you that other people could practice at home?
Winning week for me is when I stayed in a state of peace, not even necessarily happiness, because happiness and peace aren't necessarily the same thing, right? Life is not always, you know, and I've, with even the name of my show, Positive Head, I've had this conversation a lot. It doesn't mean you've always got to be in this blissed out, happy state, but being at peace with what is. So for me at this point in my journey, if I'm flowing and I'm at peace with what is and what's happening, and I'm not getting agitated, one of the byproducts of my energy level and spazziness, as we touched on, can be that, getting agitated and frustrated and get into sort of the spiral of, getting, on edge and tweaked out about something and irritated and grumpy and all those things. So if I'm not going there and I'm maintaining peace, even if something's arising, especially if something that's arising that normal, like a year or 5 years ago would have had me on this whole tangent of being, in a sort of a negative state, then that's a winning week for me. If I go through a week and it's I was calm this whole week. Look at that.
How do you set your intention in advance? Because you spoke upon it, when you look back at the week, if you're able to be calm and accepting, is there a way to be proactive?
Absolutely. I would say, and this goes into the other question that you had, what is something a tip that you would recommend? Now, for me, I've got a startup business that's growing. I've got a podcast that I'm doing like a madman, 5 days a week. I'm a single father. So I've got a lot of things that I'm juggling. So it's very easy for me to open my eyes out of bed and say, time to go, run. I've got 1,001 things to do. Go. And instead of doing that, some days I'm better than others about it, but I'm getting better all the time. Staying in bed for a few minutes and just going right into a meditation, deep breathing techniques. Breath is such an amazing gift that if you notice, if you're breathing deeply, you can't be upset and agitated. Next time you find yourself, getting there, that's why you say, take it. I mean, it's kind of a known thing, but really we're not giving it its due, I don't think. So if you can practice deep breathing as you start your day, first thing, it just instantly sets a tone that is going to carry throughout the day.
What a concept.
Yeah,
breathing.
I know.
Great reminder. Thank you. All right, Brandon, it is time for the Truth Challenge.
Dun, dun, dun.
So I'm going to ask you 5 questions that I've come up with specifically for you. And it's your job to answer them honestly and authentically, as you've been doing throughout this whole episode.
Excellent.
And you're going to have 30 seconds to answer each. I think that's probably going to be the most challenging.
Totally.
So do you accept the challenge?
I accept the challenge.
All right. The Truth Challenge with the one and only Brandon Beachum. Question number 1 for you, Brandon. If you had to instill one piece of wisdom to your son, what would it be?
You are capable of any and all things that can be done.
Question number 2, and this is our Giving Confessions question. I'd like to invite you to share something that you're either embarrassed to admit, ashamed to admit, or you generally wouldn't tell anyone, but you're willing to do so here today on the one and only because it can help somebody.
Excellent. This goes a little bit into what I was talking about earlier with relationship. I've had a lot of a lot of sexual experience, maybe more than my fair share, but I do not feel like I've ever truly made love. For me, sex and love, I'm a very love-centered person, have kind of been mutually exclusive. And for a while, that really made me question myself. What's wrong with me? And now I realize it's all about telling the story. It's leading up to, you talked about finding that soulmate, that perfect partner. I have no doubt that as I make that connection, that will open up for me.
Question number 3. If you had to pick one, what's been your most mind-blowing experience?
Wow, that's a good question. I had an experience at Lightning in a Bottle festival a few years ago where my partner had been singing a song for months. All of a sudden, this person was kind of staring at us as we walked out. She said, "I'm sorry I stared at you. There's something about you." We walked out. She started singing the same melody out of nowhere. We went back in. She's in a trance. It led to hours of someone convulsing, channeling some energy through them, bringing just profound messages to me. And one of the biggest messages was, do not doubt yourself.
Question number 4. What is the ultimate nature of reality? This is your question.
The ultimate nature of reality. The separation between you and I is an illusion. All is one. It's one, the source consciousness that created me and created you. We are it. We are the ones that built this place. We have amnesia to the fact that we're the designers, we're the lead directors, actors in our own private movie. This is God-godding, and you are both simultaneously, the creation and the creator.
And question number 5. How would you define your love for yourself?
I would define my love for myself as ever growing, ever expanding, and reflected in the love that I share for the world. So it's once again, it's a mirror. So as I touch more people's lives, I know that my love for myself is expanding because it's always a reflection in some way of self-love.
The true challenge with the one and only Brandon Beachum. I have loved this conversation. It's so many things on my list that we didn't even get to today. So
maybe again one day. Yes, I would love that.
I would love that. This has been such a beautiful conversation. I hope everyone who's tuning in has found it equally as enjoyable. And can I give you a gift?
Oh, I would love a gift.
My reflection back to you is similar to the reflection you gave to me in terms of my love life and the blocks, that perhaps there is an element of loving yourself that you still get to give that gift to yourself so you can allow yourself the experience of experiencing that true lovemaking that you seek.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you. That's quite a gift.
You are worthy of it, my friend.
Oh, thank you so much. As are you. You're such a beautiful reflection.
Thank you. And from the outside, you're already showing up that way to me.
Beautiful. Likewise. It's like, when you talk about that being in a challenge in your life, I kind of almost want to laugh, giggle, it's like, could you be more of a catch? Of course, we're just in our own ways with these things. And when you realize that, it's kind of like the cosmic gaffe, it's like,
let's wrap up this super fun conversation here. What can we do to support you?
What can you do to support me? Well, just doing this is so much support. This is my dream, my vision is to share myself with the world. And if I can touch anyone's life in any way, and by doing this, that you are supporting me now. I can't really think of a way that would be more fulfilling than just giving me the privilege and honor of being on your show and connecting with you and forming a friendship with you. Is really all I can ask for at this point. It's because it's a lot, and it means a lot, and I love it. I'm very appreciative.
Yeah, me too. Is there anything that we didn't get to in today's episode that you feel really inclined to share?
No, you are thorough. You do really good at you're excellent at this. As a fellow podcaster, I admire your form and the way you make it all flow very nicely. Yet you have your structure and things that you control the conversation in a way that makes it still flow very naturally. And I feel like I got it all out.
Thank you. Awesome. That means a lot. And tearing up over here.
Oh, beautiful.
What final words of wisdom, advice do you have for listeners of the one and only to live an epic and fulfilling dream life?
As I just touched on, stop doubting yourself. You are a divine being. You're not a human being trying to have a spiritual experience. You're a spiritual being having a human experience. Don't take my word for it. Be open to that idea and start playing with the idea that you are so worthy, and turning that self-love faucet on completely. Focusing on radical gratitude is the doorway to what you seek next. If you want to know what you're going to see tomorrow, look at what you're feeling today. So start finding things to be appreciative of, even to a crazy level, the seat under my butt, the fact that my belly's full, the roof over my house, radical gratitude. Just focus on that, and that like attracts like. So where attention goes, energy flows. So if you want to see more abundance in your life, be grateful for where you're at, because where you're at is perfect. It's perfectly imperfect to lead you to the next greatest and grandest version of yourself.
The one and only Brandon Beachum. Have you felt pretty present during this interview?
I have.
Right here and now.
I felt very present. I felt very grounded, calmer than, sometimes I get very animated and calm in a good way, but animated in a good way as well. And so, I feel like it's a gift to help me continue to refine myself, and doing video along with it is certainly great as well, because it adds an element that I seek to implement. And of course, it brings a different thing too. When you've got cameras on you, you're maybe more self-conscious, or, it's easier when you're just behind a mic, I find. But this has been great. And
you're a complete natural. Let's please do it again soon.
Oh, please. Thank you so much, my friend.
Much love, brother.
Much love.
Great show. Thank you, Brandon Beachum, for being a guest. I really enjoyed so much of it. It was really refreshing stuff. I like the conversation around intention, really being aware of why we're doing the things we're doing. If we're being in service, are we, truly aiming to be of service, or are we fulfilling, our own ego or our own self, which, Brandon kind of talks about is okay. He talks about a lot of his own motivation for his podcast being to improve himself, which is a beautiful offering. And I think inspires other people to want to step up for themselves as well. So it was a great piece of content. If you want to receive the quotes that were mentioned in the show, please visit areyoubeingreel.com/127, and you can check those out and get more information on Brandon and more details from the show. Also, remember, if you want to check out something new, it's a great time always to check out new things. So Organifi.com is a proud sponsor of the podcast, and you can use the code WinningWeeks at the checkout to get 20% off. If you feel inspired by the show and you feel called to share it, that people will get value out of it, we welcome that. So feel free to share along the link at areyoubeingreel.com/127 and get your friends on board. It's kind of a short life we're living, and we're all doing our best and inspiring everybody to really show up and be their best self, or just be comfortable being themselves. And I think these are important, pieces of content for us to tune into and get a little refresher, get some motivation, really remember, some of the things Brandon talked about are so simple and yet so overlooked. And I think that's what a lot of wisdom is in action. Wherever you go, there you are, that you are going to show up consistently in your life, and life is going to brush up against you. And all the people that you interact with and encounter today, tomorrow, yesterday are all for your learning and all for your growth. So tune into that a bit. I think it's time. I think it's time on the planet that these voices are shared and raised, and we kind of remember this basic stuff. We got so much technology and so much information and content around, and these kind of shows are always inspiring to me, because I think it reminds us of being human and this ride of life that we're all together, and how you can really have a good outlook on it and really feel good about the mark you're making in the world. But again, this is Doug Aiken, and if you're interested in digging in a little deeper on some of the wisdom and experiences that I've gathered from my life and my journey, you can visit areyoubeingreel.com/123 and check out the episode that Mark and I created together. Thank you so much. It's been a blast. Have an amazing day. Go out and create something magical. Be the vibration that you are, which is love, and dance and do whatever else feels good. Enjoy.
After spending the first 30 years of my life trying to gain love and acceptance, doing and saying whatever I perceived was necessary to get it, I still came up short and felt worse about myself in the process. Today, I'm committed to living an authentic life I'm proud of, and I invite you to join me by fully embracing the unique gift you are to the world. Learn more about this show at areyoubeingreel.com and share this with your family and friends, and feel free to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Have fun, be the one and only you, and make your mark today.